The worst
Leaded
mistakes ever
gasoline
made by humans.
disaster. So,
Oh,
imagine you're a scientist, smart guy, degree on the wall, lab coat, the whole thing, and you discover something that stops car engines from knocking. Great.
What? Restart. What does that even mean?
Wonderful. You're a hero. Except the thing you discovered is lead, and you decide to put it in gasoline. And then everyone puts it in gasoline, and then the entire planet breathes lead for about 70 years.
Oh, nice. And this sounds recent, too, because cars are recent.
That guy was Thomas Midgley Jr. And before you feel too bad for him, hold on because we're coming back to him. Spoiler, he also invented CFCs. The same man. One person. Responsible for arguably the 2 worst chemical disasters in human history.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
At some point, the universe should have just taken his chemistry set away. Leaded gasoline started in the 1920s.
Yeah,
General Motors,
recent,
Standard Oil,
they
all knew pretty quickly that lead was toxic. There were workers dying in the refineries. People called the factories houses of butterflies because workers would hallucinate before collapsing. That's not a great sign. That's not the kind of thing you put in a press release. And yet, somehow, leaded gasoline stayed in use until the 1970s and 80s in most countries, and some places kept using it until 2021.
5 years ago. Wow.
2021. There are people alive today who were born after the moon landing and grew up breathing lead. The consequences. Researchers estimate that leaded gasoline lowered the average IQ of an entire generation. Not one person, not one city, an entire generation of humans across the whole planet, just slightly less intelligent than they could have been, because someone in a suit decided the knocking sound in a car engine.
Like, this type of stuff is so stupid. Like, we literally get nerfed and hurt because some random person decides to, let's put lead in the hair. Huzzah!
It was more annoying than poisoning the atmosphere. And Thomas Midgley Jr., just to close the loop on this man, died in 1944 tangled in a system of ropes and pulleys he invented to help himself get out of bed after contracting polio. The ropes strangled him. He was killed by his own invention. History has a dark sense of humor.
Fortnite.
April 26th, 1986.
Chernobyl. Darn Chernobyl. We all know about
this. It's the middle of the night, and the engineers at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant are running a safety test. A safety test. To make sure the reactor would be safe in an emergency. You already see where this is going. The test had been delayed all day. The operators were tired. They were working with a reactor that had been specifically warned against running at low power for exactly the conditions they were about to create. The reactor design, the RBMK-1000, had a flaw, a fundamental catastrophic flaw. When the reactor ran at low power, it became unstable. More heat meant more steam meant more reaction meant more heat. Positive feedback loop. The thing that's supposed to stop a nuclear reaction was actually making it worse. And the operators didn't fully know this, because the Soviet government hadn't told them. Because telling workers about a design flaw in a Soviet nuclear reactor would mean admitting the Soviet Union had made a mistake, and that was apparently worse than the alternative. At 1:23 a.m., the reactor power...
Instead of admitting a mistake... Wait. Guys. Instead of admitting we made a mistake, let's leave the mistake. And let's have our nuclear plant explode and affect millions of people across the world, and they won't know we made a mistake. What? Like, bro, what?
Surged to about 10 times its maximum.
Like, do these people not think? Think
the steam explosion
maybe
that
if your mistake
ton reactor lid
explodes,
the building.
People might find out.
Then a second explosion, then a graphite fire that shot radioactive particles 2 kilometers into the air. The firefighters who arrived first thought it was a normal fire. They picked up pieces of graphite from the reactor core with their bare hands. Some of them were dead within weeks. The Soviet government's initial response was to tell people it was fine. It was not fine. The city of Pripyat, 50,000 people, wasn't evacuated until 36 hours after the explosion. They told residents to pack for 3 days. Most of them never went back. The cloud of radiation drifted across Europe. Sweden detected abnormal radiation levels on a worker's shoes and initially thought their own plant had a leak. It hadn't. It was Chernobyl, from hundreds of miles away. The total death toll is still debated. Official Soviet figures said 31 people. The actual number accounting for cancer deaths, long-term health effects, and the catastrophic impact on communities across Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia runs into the tens of thousands or higher, depending on the study. The exclusion zone around the reactor is still uninhabitable. It will be for another 20,000 years.
20,000? I ain't gonna be alive then. What?
All of this because of a safety test gone wrong on a reactor with a known design flaw that nobody was allowed to talk about.
Bro?
The Amazon.
The Amazon. Whoa. Amazon is a pretty good invention. I cannot lie. I can order whatever I need, get it within 24 hours. Please do not hate on Amazon.
Here's a mistake that isn't one dramatic moment. No explosion, no mushroom cloud, just a slow, steady, catastrophically bad decision that's been happening for decades and is still happening right now.
All right, man.
The Amazon rainforest covers about 5.5 million square kilometers. It produces roughly 20% of the world's oxygen.
Okay, I know what the Amazon is.
The system that sustained it will have been broken past the point of recovery. And why? Agriculture, cattle ranching, soy farming, illegal logging. In some cases, the land cleared isn't even used productively. It's just cleared, because clearing is profitable. Trees are... Gasoline thing was bad, but this man wasn't done.
Let's hear it.
In the 1920s and 30s, refrigerators used refrigerants like ammonia and sulfur dioxide.
Bro,
these were toxic. Refrigerators occasionally...
do we not think? Do we not think when we do things?
Leaked and killed people in their homes. This was clearly a problem.
Oh my god, sad. It was a problem because they put toxic chemicals in the fridge.
Italy developed a new class of chemicals, chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, non-toxic, stable, non-flammable, worked perfectly. A genuine improvement. The problem is that stable in chemistry means doesn't break down easily. And when CFCs eventually drifted up into the stratosphere,
basically means it won't ever go away. Wow.
The ultraviolet radiation up there did break them down. And the chlorine atoms that were released, each one of them could destroy up to 100,000 ozone molecules. The ozone layer, the thing that protects every living thing on Earth from ultraviolet radiation, started developing a hole. By the 1980s, scientists discovered a hole in the ozone layer.
Bro, like what are we doing? There was a part, I've heard about this, in a part of Brazil, like the cows and stuff, or people would get sunburns within 10 minutes because there's just no ozone layer.
Over Antarctica, the size of North America. Skin cancer rates were rising. Ecosystems were being disrupted. Good news, and this is one of the few stories in this video with actual good news, is that humanity responded.
We repaired it.
The Montreal Protocol, 1987, 197 countries agreed to phase
out Earth chat.
CFCs. It is the most widely ratified treaty in United Nations history. The ozone layer is slowly recovering and is expected to return to 1980 levels by around 2060. So we made a catastrophic mistake, we noticed it, we cooperated internationally, and we're fixing it, which proves we're capable of doing that, which makes some of the other things on this list even more frustrating. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. August 6th, 1945. A single American bomber, the Enola Gay, flew over Hiroshima. Japan, dropped a bomb called Little Boy. The explosion was equivalent to about 15,000 tons of TNT. The temperature at the hypocenter reached approximately 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. An estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people died instantly. This isn't the place to resolve it. What is inarguable is that two cities full of civilian human beings, somewhere between 15 and 55 million people died in China. The range is that wide because the Chinese government suppressed data and the full scale of what happened is still being pieced together by historians. Mao Zedong, the leader of the People's Republic of China, launched a campaign called the Great Leap Forward in 1958. The goal was to rapidly transform China from an agricultural society into a communist industrial superpower in a few years. Which is not how industrialization works, but nobody told Mao that.
Gotta take time, gotta go from plants to trees to factories, factories to industrial factories, industrial factories to cities, cities to cars, cars to planes, planes to spaceships, spaceships to the moon, moon to Mars. Boom. That's how you get to Mars.
They tried, and things didn't go well for them. Part of the campaign involved Mao's Four Pests initiative, which declared war on rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Sparrows. Because sparrows ate grain seeds, and grain seeds were valuable. So hundreds of millions of people were mobilized to kill sparrows. They banged drums, played instruments, shook trees, did whatever they could to keep sparrows in the air until they died of exhaustion. It is estimated that about 1 billion sparrows were killed. Here's the problem. Sparrows don't just eat grain seeds, they also eat insects, specifically
locusts. You can't just take out an animal and they... Bro, like, what are we doing? What are we doing, bro?
And when you remove 1 billion sparrows from an ecosystem, the locust population explodes.
Like,
and locusts eat crops. The crops that hundreds of millions of people depend on to survive.
Eating all the food because what are we doing?
At the same time, Mao was exporting grain to the Soviet Union to pay off debts, insisting to foreign governments that China was thriving, while local officials were so afraid of reporting bad news to Beijing that they fabricated harvest figures.
Bro.
Mao believed the fabricated figures, kept exporting food, ordered more steel production instead of farming. People were pulling up railroad tracks and destroying tools to meet steel quotas, meaning fewer tools for the farms that were already struggling.
So basically, GG's to the farms. There was no food. They all starved, bro.
The result was the deadliest famine in recorded human history. Entire villages were depopulated. And because information was suppressed, because admitting failure was politically dangerous, the policies continued for years after the death toll was clearly catastrophic. Thalidomide scandal. In the 1950s and early 1960s, a drug called thalidomide was prescribed to pregnant women in Europe, Canada, Australia, and other countries to treat morning sickness. It worked well for that. What it also did, which the manufacturers either didn't test for or chose not to highlight, was cause severe birth defects. Specifically, it interfered with limb development in developing fetuses. More than 10,000 children were born with severe malformations. Many had shortened or absent limbs. Many others were stillborn or died shortly after birth.
So, I think that a medicine that deals with pregnant women maybe should say something that your child, if you take this when you're pregnant, will have birth defects.
The reason the United States largely escaped this disaster was a single FDA reviewer named Frances Kelsey, who repeatedly refused to approve thalidomide for American use because she wasn't satisfied with the safety data. The pharmaceutical company pressured her. Her superiors received complaints. She held firm. She was right. The thalidomide scandal transformed drug regulation worldwide. The idea that drugs needed to be tested for safety in pregnant women, the idea that pharmaceutical companies needed to provide extensive safety data rather than just effectiveness data. A lot of modern drug regulation exists because of this.
You gotta think, something can be effective and have side effects. Like, for example, bricks, you can eat them and you won't be hungry. But I assume they have no nutrition and then you die.
Catastrophe. Another case where the lesson was written in tragedy. Invasion of Iraq. In March 2003, the United States, the United Kingdom, and a coalition of allies invaded Iraq. The stated justification was that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed an imminent threat to global security. The weapons of mass destruction did not exist. The intelligence was wrong. Or rather, it was gathered selectively, interpreted through a lens of pre-existing conclusions, and presented to the public with a confidence that the underlying data absolutely did not support. Analysts who raised doubts were sidelined. Inconvenient findings were buried. What followed was a war that lasted years, cost over $1 trillion, killed somewhere between 150,000 and 600,000 Iraqi civilians, depending on the method.
I feel like war is stupid because, a lot of times countries have war, and who pays? The citizens. So how about instead of war, we have a 1v1 boxing match between the two countries' leaders? How about that? And whoever loses, loses, and whoever wins, wins. And if you want a rematch, you can have a rematch. But if you lose, then you lose. Or a UFC match, MMA style.
Methodology used to count them. Killed nearly 5,000 American and coalition troops. Destabilized an entire region. Contributed to the rise of ISIS. Created a humanitarian catastrophe that's still unfolding, and fundamentally altered international trust in American and British intelligence assessments for years afterward. The people who made the decision mostly faced no significant consequences. Several wrote books. One gave a famous speech at a funeral that people found moving and briefly forgot about the war. The Iraqis who died stayed dead. The Dust Bowl. In the 1930s, a combination of drought and catastrophically bad farming practices turned approximately 100 million acres of American and Canadian Great Plains into a wasteland. Massive dust storms, some so large they were visible from airplanes at altitude, rolled across the Midwest.
See, that coughing was just from thinking of the Dust Bowl. Like, it was just so bad.
1935, Black Sunday, turned the sky completely black and deposited enormous amounts of debris.
Like Black Friday, where I get my discounts.
As far east as Washington, D.C. and New York. Here's the thing. The Great Plains grasslands had evolved over thousands of years to hold the soil in place.
And then they took it all out. And then the Dust Bowl started rolling.
Drought-resistant grasses, the whole ecosystem was adapted to the climate. When settlers arrived, they plowed all of it up. Every bit, because grass wasn't wheat and wheat was money. Then
money
because droughts happen on the Great Plains. They always have. The deep root systems of the native grasses could survive it. The shallow roots of wheat crops couldn't. So the crops died, and there was nothing holding the soil down, and the wind took it. An estimated 3.5 million people were displaced. The Okies, farmers from Oklahoma and surrounding states, streamed west to California looking for work, finding mostly hostility and misery. John Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath about it. The New Deal introduced conservation programs, farmers were paid to plant shelter belts of trees, soil conservation methods were developed, and then decades later, in parts of the world, people plowed up grasslands and planted crops without adequate water management and over-extracted groundwater from aquifers. Because the lesson was available. But lessons you don't personally experience are easy to not learn. The Aral Sea. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world. By 2007, it had shrunk to 10% of its original size. Ships that once sailed it now sit rusting in the middle of a desert, miles from any water. The Soviet Union decided in the 1950s and 60s to massively expand cotton and rice production in Central Asia. The Aral Sea was fed by two rivers, the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya. Soviet planners diverted those rivers for irrigation. The rivers stopped reaching the sea.
And there's going to be no water left.
The sea started shrinking. Nobody stopped it, because stopping it would mean admitting the irrigation program was a failure, and the Soviet Union didn't do that. Local officials reported the sea's decline.
A lot of these issues sound like it's from people not wanting to admit they're wrong.
Upward, but nothing changed. The fishing industry collapsed. The climate around the sea changed as the moderating effect of a large body of water disappeared. Salt and pesticide residue from the exposed seabed blew across the region. Cancer rates spiked. Infant mortality rose. The local ecosystem was essentially destroyed. It is one of the worst environmental disasters caused directly by human decision-making, notable not just for the scale of destruction, but for the completeness of it. There wasn't even a period of uncertainty where maybe...
That is crazy. 2000, whole entire sea. 18 years later, nothing. I mean, it looks like it kind of went through stages. Like 2014, there's actually just nothing. 2018, there's a little more. So maybe at some point they tried to start fixing it, but it's just probably too late.
It might recover. The trajectory was visible from the beginning to anyone paying attention. Boston molasses. Flood. Okay.
Molasses?
Brief change of pace. Because history is also absurd.
Okay.
January 15th, 1919. Boston, North End. A storage tank containing approximately 2.3 million gallons of molasses failed, catastrophically. The molasses wave was estimated to be 8 to 15 feet high and
6, 7
traveled at 35 miles per hour, which is faster than you can run, especially when you're about to be hit by a wave of molasses and have not been warned this was
I can run quick.
Going to happen. 21 people died. 150 were injured. Buildings were destroyed. Horses were trapped and drowned. The cleanup took weeks.
Took over.
Witnesses reported that the area smelled of molasses on hot summer days for years afterward. Why did the tank fail? Because the company that owned it, the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, built it in a hurry during World War I to meet demand for industrial alcohol used in munitions production, used substandard materials, and ignored the fact that it was visibly...
The darn maple syrup took over the whole darn city. You had to be there for the syrup flood.
Leaking from the moment it was built. Locals reportedly collected leaked molasses off the ground for personal use. The tank groaned and creaked. It had never been properly tested. The company initially blamed anarchists for blowing up the tank.
Anarchists.
Sabotage. No evidence of this. The disaster was entirely structural failure caused by shoddy construction and no meaningful oversight. It resulted in one of
just another darn situation people don't want to admit they're darn wrong.
The first major product liability cases in American history, and contributed to the development of engineering standards and building codes. Great. Excellent. Glad 21 people drowned in syrup so we could learn that lesson. Banqiao. While Chernobyl gets most of the attention as a Soviet-era infrastructure catastrophe, the Banqiao Dam failure in China in 1975 deserves to be mentioned in the same breath, except that it's barely mentioned at all. The Banqiao Dam in Henan province failed during Typhoon Nina in August 1975.
Typhoons.
The dam had been built in the early 1950s. A Soviet advisor who helped design it reportedly had concerns about safety,
That looks like a lot of water.
but was dismissed as being too conservative. Warning gauges failed during the storm. Radio equipment was broken. Emergency messages warning of the dam's imminent failure couldn't get through. When the dam failed, it created a wave 10 kilometers wide and 3 to 7 meters high, traveling at 50 kilometers per hour, destroying dozens more dams downstream in a cascade. The death toll estimates range from 85,000 to 240,000
What is that cloud outside? Oh my gosh, it's not a cloud. Like actually,
people. The disaster was classified as a state secret by the Chinese government for nearly 2 decades. Most of the world had no
How do you
idea
keep that
it had
secret?
happened. 85,000 to 240,000 people. One dam failure. That most of the world still doesn't know about.
Yeah, I
The
ain't never
Titanic.
heard of that. The Titanic.
The Titanic story is famous enough that you know the basics. April 1912, ship hits iceberg, sinks, 1,500 people die. Movie, Celine Dion, etc. But the mistake isn't really there was an iceberg. The mistake is a collection of smaller decisions that turned a survivable disaster into a
The
catastrophic
Titanic
one.
2.0.
The ship was going too fast for the ice conditions. Other ships had sent ice warnings. The warnings were received and largely ignored because there was a schedule to keep. There was a reception happening on board. Nobody wanted to slow down. The ship carried 20 lifeboats. Capacity for...
Wait, guys. Maybe if we don't slow down, the iceberg will leave. Maybe the iceberg will be nice and leave us alone. Maybe if we don't slow down, we go into the iceberg and we sink, we'll get there quicker.
For about
what is going through their
1,178 people.
heads?
There were 2,224 people on board, and even the lifeboats that were available were launched half empty in the early stages of the sinking, because officers didn't believe passengers would fill them, or because there wasn't a clear system for loading them. The nearby ship Californian was close enough to have rendered assistance. Its radio operator had gone to sleep. He'd been trying to warn the Titanic about ice conditions earlier in the evening and had been brusquely told to stop interrupting because the Titanic's operator was busy sending passenger telegrams. The Californian's crew saw the distress rockets, woke the captain. The captain couldn't make up his mind about what to do. By the time assistance came, it was too late. The Titanic disaster led directly to new maritime safety regulations. Enough lifeboats for everyone became mandatory. 24-hour radio monitoring became required.
But those are
as
good
with
rules.
all of these stories, the question is why it took the disaster to make those things happen. The information that ships needed more lifeboats was available before the Titanic sank. Someone had just decided it wasn't necessary. The Y2K story.
Yeah, you gotta think though, before the Titanic and even after, there's not that many ships that sink. Anytime they sink, it's because of the people driving the boat usually. Like the boats don't just sink themselves. So that's probably why they didn't think they needed lifeboats. But that's also why they didn't think they needed a rule for the radio, because they thought the people would just listen to the radio.
Here's a mistake that almost happened and didn't, and then got mocked for not happening, which is arguably also a mistake. In the early days of computing, programmers stored years using 2 digits instead of 4. 1985 was stored
1999
as
to
85.
2000. Is that this story?
Simple, efficient, and it saved precious memory when memory was expensive. The problem is that when the year 2000 arrived, computers would read 00 and might interpret that as 1900.
What about 2020?
Systems that calculated dates, which by the 1990s meant virtually every significant piece of infrastructure in the world, banks, power grids, hospitals, air traffic control, might fail or produce catastrophic errors. People began noticing this in the late 1980s and raised alarms through the 1990s. Governments spent hundreds of billions of dollars globally fixing their systems. Companies audited and updated software. There was an enormous international effort to patch the problem before it hit.
Come on, chat.
The year 2000 arrived. Very little went wrong. Some minor glitches, some small
failures,
nothing